just thought it might be a good thing to emphasize a little. What was the idea behind this symposium in the first place when you started working in the academy to actually have this symposium? What was the focus?
As you know, the main role of the academy is to promote the sciences and to strengthen the role of sciences in society. So then I think it was very clear that we thought it was important then also discuss how do we assess, how do we select the science of the highest quality. So we discussed this for quite a long time, and then we decided to go on. And then we thought that it would be very relevant to invite the Young Academy, because it was, of course, very good to have young persons to discuss with, but also, of course, the reason they will get funding much longer than we will in the future. So this is actually how it started.
And so far, I know that you have a few minutes to summarize the symposium, but before we invite the next panel, what has been of most surprise to you so far?
I don't think there has been so much surprise, but I think this discussion is very important I mean, you can see there is a lot of consensus in the audience here. And it's so important to have the scientific community, also to have research funders, and in particular then, as you have seen here, we have invited many from other countries also to get new ideas into the funding system here. And I'm certain that in the audience we have many people who are in panels also. There's maybe one thing which has not been discussed so much, but I hope that the funding agencies will discuss this a lot. I have actually been working in research councils and in panels since the beginning of the 80s. It's a long time. And then, of course, that was before the advent of bibliography. We couldn't easily get age indices, and so that was not even invented. So then we had to read, of course, the applications, but also several papers from the researcher, from the applicants. And now what I've seen recently in panels, that the metrics have taken over to an extent which I fear is a little bit too much. And this is something that I think should be discussed also, because we risk also that we miss some very important science and tend to maybe fund what is a little bit more mainstream, because we tend to count the number of papers and the impact factors of the journals and so, which can be important in some way, but we tend to use that a little bit too much, is my fear. So I look very much forward to listen to the research council's members and also to the scientists, if they now decide to talk about this.
They will, because I have this question here as number 3.
Okay.
So we will bring it up in the next panel.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Christina. And thank you very much for coming here. The next panel, please. So please say welcome again to Lars Hultman, and to Göran Sandberg, and to Sven Stafström, and to Britt-Marie Sjöberg. A warm hand. Please take a seat. There we are. You've met all of them before, except for Britt-Marie, who is you're here in the capacity of the Wenner-Gren Foundations, where you're the chief executive officer it is. So I think you can have the first saying here now. When we've heard so much during the day, and it's quite a lot of consensus, but it's been also some hotter sort of issues here. What's in your mind at the moment?
Well, I think I'll echo what people have said, actually, because I agree with most of what has been said. But when it comes to funding breakthrough science, as the question is posed, actually, I would say no one can know how to do that, and especially not politicians, not executives, not funding agencies, and not university leaders, actually. And you cannot put too much restrictions if you want breakthrough science also. You shouldn't try to get mobility, regionality, internationalizations to special degrees, or put focus on special fields or so. So it has to boil down to individuals and ideas. And
Still, we've seen some strategies here from the founders,
Yes.
how they approach this.
yes, and
challenge.
I'm still sort of the one that think that it should come from individuals and ideas, even though I know that there are big programs for other things. And for the Wenner-Gren foundations, we have the aim of promoting collaborative international research. So we get a good number of applications, but not too many. So we can actually dig very deep down into them. We read the applications, we grade them out of that. For the very prestigious program we have, we actually interview also. And if I can put some personal view to it, I think reading the applications, I actually read all 600 that comes in through a year. And it has actually given me quite a lot of new things and thoughts. And also when I listen to the other reviewers presenting something, I also understand quite a lot more about other sciences. We are funding all different areas. And when it comes to reviews, I think I can speak of the entire reviewing panel, actually. We sit down for 3 intensive days for reviewing, and we are old people, all of us, and we walk out like young people because it's so fantastic to listen to all these
There you have
young
something.
scientists with super bright ideas and enormous enthusiasm. So to me, it gives a lot, actually.
Thank you. So before we dig deeper into the measurement question and the indexes, etc., as Christina pointed out, I give each of you the chance to add to what have been said. Is there any aspect of this question now that we haven't really been deep enough in so far? What do you say, Lars?
We should celebrate today. I'm extremely optimistic by listening to the young academy and the next generations.
You also feel younger when you go.
Academia
here.
will surely prevail. I sense the force is strong with you.
Good, good. Do you share that feeling?
Oh yes,
Sven?
of course. And I was impressed by the presentations, all the foundations we have seen here from Sweden and from
Any new
abroad.
ideas that you can bring home?
Yeah, sure. Many things. I mean, we not really new because, of course, I've seen most of it before. But you get some, additional insights that I think are very useful. So, but for instance, the randomization is something that we are about to start to test in one small call, and it's really good to hear that other funding agencies or foundations are using that as well, and we can maybe call them and ask for advice when it comes to when we start up the process. And I also agree with Britt-Marie concerning, and I think that's also Göran said, that breakthrough. It's almost an intrinsic property of that word that it cannot be predicted. The unknowns, they are unknown, and they sort of appear without knowing it. So, and there is really the scientists that we should look for good scientists that are devoted. I think this is a key word, devoted to their idea. I remember that was, I think, 2014 when. There was a group of Japanese got the Nobel Prize for the blue light emitting diode, and they told me the story, how long time it took, and they were almost alone in their idea, but they were so devoted that, and finally they had a success. And I think this is the scientist is really the key player here.
Göran?
I have 2 reflections. One is on the audience.
One is
on the audience.
yes.
The Swedish universities wants to get more money from you, for example. So how to access scientific quality should be a top priority for the university management, rectors, vice rectors, deans. We have a number of rectors and some vice rectors here. But where are the others? They're obviously busy with something else. Exactly. They should, of course, have been here because it should be a top priority for the university leadership. If I go to an innovation meeting at IVA, I would find at least 20 more of the university leaderships than I find in a discussion like that. And that disturbs me a lot. They should be focused on this.
But what is this with universities then? Have we touched upon it before lunch. Do we have a system that is, I know Gunnar used the word weak, but is it I look for the English word for ängslig.
No, it's not that.
It's not that?
It's not that. Swedish universities are compared with other agencies in Sweden and has to obey all laws and regulations. These are busy people, but they are busy to fulfill everything from the audit thing and this and that. And we don't have a leadership that has a role to focus on science and education. The top priorities of the university, they have to do everything. But
so
it's not that these people is not wanting to do it.
other things than the core that should be research.
Yes.
So, and the leaders may be more occupied with administration than other
I think it's wrong to say that we have the wrong leaders, but I think we have a system that is not allowing the leaders to focus on the important things like science.
Good. And Lars?
I was using this concept before in my address, and we could really contribute on this side of the room to combat lock-ins.
Lock-in situations at universities? Or?
Yes, that Göran was touching upon. And also to break up the path to termination that seems to infest the system. We cannot continue like we do.
But what can we do then to unlock? Who are we to unlock?
Everyone should contribute, and the funding agencies, it's easy for us to change our funding schemes. I mean, we are probably the most adaptive, agile part of the system, but it will not help unless the university also change. We heard today, very important to install, one can probably even say reinstate tenure tracks, real tenure tracks. We also need to ensure that we get some circulation out of the system. You know the Kirchhoff's laws in electronics that if you want to pass something through a medium, you need to have a flux also on the other side. Otherwise, you will have things that accumulate in the nodes, and we are seeing a lot of accumulation. And this is bad news for the young generation. If you want to make your career, and you should choose a place wisely, someone needs to move for you to make a career. So you need a flux.
I think to me it seems that the next, a follow-up from this seminar, symposium really could be a meeting with the university management and leadership to actually sit down together and talk about those things.
I meet them every month because we have a principals council that appoints two rectors out of 8 on our board. They appoint our auditors. We are not allowed to have a granting strategy which out that the rectors agree to. That's why I'm saying that these people, they are doing a competent job, but they don't have enough time to focus on the important stuff.
Exactly. Thank you.
I think it would be interesting and to know a little bit more about how the block funding is distributed. So it comes into the university management and then it sort of diffuses through the organization, and on what grounds, on what principles, how does scientific quality come into that process? So that such a discussion I think would have been interesting to complement the discussion we have here right now that concerns our type of assessment of scientific quality.
Britt-Marie.
I cannot understand why we are always discussing sort of putting universities on one side and funding agencies on the other side. All we want, both of us, is to actually have good research. So we should be working together instead. And as it is now, university says they have too little money, and there's the new proposition that money should be taken out of the research council and put to the universities because the universities cannot fund positions. But if I look back several years back, then, I mean, the research council were actually giving out positions or money for positions to universities. The persons who got those positions could shop around between universities. Now we hear that universities were forced to hire people. They were not forced to hire. They could say no thank you, and the person could go somewhere else and find a better university. So I think it was the universities who wanted part of the legislation that it would be the universities who hired all people, actually. And that has sort of made like a barrier between funding agencies and universities, which I hope would not be there.
It doesn't benefit
No.
the researchers at all. So to Christina's question then, how you identify applications and individuals, and if we can avoid too much measurements and indexes, since they can be misleading and steer the researcher in a wrong direction, maybe, Göran?
We don't allow bibliometrics. We don't provide bibliometrics, we don't allow that in the discussion. And
But everyone can Google.
Exactly. And we don't allow the argument, this one has so many citations. There's one argument I usually allow if I'm listening in. If someone says that this person has been in science for 30 years, the last 10 years, there is not one single citation to the person, then it's either so genius what the person is doing or no one cares. Then you can allow the discussion.
Could be.
So I really don't see this as a problem. And I think that people that are on committees, they take this really seriously. This that people don't read the application, I've never seen it. I've never seen it my whole career. I used to work a lot in NFR and VR, and I thought it was a really serious exercise that people is doing. And if people is not reading the applications, then they shouldn't be on the committees, of course. We would kick them out immediately.
Sven, do you agree with the worry that Christina has here? That
No, I fully agree with Göran. I think it was a bit provocative. You said we are using bibliometrics, and I don't know who we is in that case. But
It's not us.
it's not us, and we have, and I think also it goes back a long time ago that we haven't used it, but we formulated quite recently, I think 2 years or 1 year ago, new guidelines for assessment of our proposals, based on 8 principles.
okay.
So I think it's pretty clear how we see the assessment process, and there are, for instance, we address issues related to the quality of the reviewers, that they should be knowledgeable about the subject. It's about ethics, it's about gender equality, etc., etc. Openness,
We
effectiveness.
can find this on your webpage.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And Lars, do you agree or disagree, or
Well,
where are you?
I think for the diversity of the situation and all the cases that the funding agencies will not be able to predict or that the researchers can see coming, that there is a virtue of having a multitude of funding agencies and funding schemes, so that when the idea comes, when there is an opportunity, that there is also a possible match with a funder. So there is some also discussion that one should maybe merge. There's always such a discussion. Should we merge into few research councils of Sweden? There's a big danger in that.
It's good with the big ecosystem. Did I hear some? Did you want to say something, Anna? Are you sure? Okay. Anybody else? Comment? Thomas?
Oh.
It's not. Oh, not.
We can hear you.
Speak up.
I can repeat the question.
Okay, so the question is, I fully agree that when you are sitting in a review panel, you should not use bibliometrics. This is the instruction we have, and this I know many other panels have. But it's also very clear to me, even many of our panel members acknowledge that they are useful. So even they just don't use it in the panel meeting, but then they use it before the panel meeting, because it does pop up, and you have kind of to say, this is not the way we like to discuss it. The only exception I have seen is actually where you have panels where all people are engaged in reviewing the application. I don't know why the demand is different. I'm not going to release that, so this is something whether it's a very clear rule about this, and please somehow to leave the room.
So it's a very short, what Thomas is saying is that they, of course, can use the Google and check the age index and whatever they want before they go to the assessment meeting or whatever. And how do we...
You can never stop that, and it is, of course, a problem, but you can lead with an example. We had that problem in one of the panels, and I said to the person, if you come with this argument 1 time more, you're out. And he did, and then he was out. And that's... I have 5 kids and 10 grandchildren, and the same type of psychology work with them and works with the panels. So.
This is the grandfather's leadership. You know what? I would like to bring another from Sven. Thank you very much for the link to this OECD report. I don't know if you've seen it. It came in October. It's called Effective Operation of Competitive Research Funding Systems. And I've just read the executive summary, but there they have some interesting key issues. And one of them is like this. Counteracting the widespread worry that peer review, especially as success rates decline, tends toward conservatism and away from potentially transformative breakthrough and interdisciplinary research. So, do you agree that this is something you should do? Is it a problem in Sweden? Sven?
I think you have to be aware of that, and that's also part of our guidelines, actually, that we instruct the reviewers to care about this, to look into the novelty and originality of the proposals, and so that should be a part of the instruction. And if you are aware of that, and that also goes to, I think, gender issues and other issues, other challenges related to peer review, that if you are aware of them and instruct the reviewers and have a discussion about that before you start the process, then you can certainly avoid them to a large extent anyway. And I think also that if you look into the literature, that is, if you read the whole report, there is also there's literature showing that is not a big problem. So it's that you often hear that, but I'm not so sure that it's a really big problem in the review.
So the peer review system is well established and not under threat.
Well, I think you need instructions. It's not just that you can call reviewers and put them into a room, give them the proposals, and let them work. I think we have to be involved.
Today we have really been
we have to have
today. Yes.
We have to have. Well,
so true. Yes, Lars.
It is a real problem, but I would say the problem, it exists everywhere, also within the university. If you distribute the basic appropriations between yourself, between your colleagues, you will have a similar situation. With one comfort, perhaps, is that we are aware of the problem on the external funding side, and we do operate a transparent system, and we are trying to improve. And all suggestions for improvement are welcome, and they are tested. And we also heard that there can be 5, 6, 7 years before we know it, if it works. But there is an attitude to improve, I would say.
Always, I suppose, Göran.
I mean, the system is far from perfect, just to admit that. It works, and there is actually a number of good examples how it can be developed and how we should look upon it. But it's a decent system. And I think, actually, the further south you come in Europe, the more problem you have with the peer review system. That's my experience. We have a tendency to try it, at least, to be honest, even if some people don't. And I learned a lesson from Gunnar. He was chairing the National Research Council many, many years ago, and in how to act in a panel. And I think VR is built on the same, which is, I admire VR. We get better reviewers because we pay much more. No, it's true. It's true. It's true. We have 500 international reviewers this year, and if you pay 1,000 euro and someone reviews 5 papers, that's a significant amount of money for a scientist.
Then they can set aside more time for it.
I can tell you a story. We had a lawyer, the family lawyer. He wanted to learn about this, and at that time we paid about 700 euro. And he said, yeah, you have to pay for quality. And it took a half year before I realized that he talked per hour and I talked per day.
Oh, dear.
So scientists are key.
There we are, Lars. Lars, you want
No, there was
to
a
add?
comment from the
Oh,
audience.
sorry, I didn't see
Dr.
that.
Jones.
Oh, please.
I don't know if anyone can hear me. This is
Yes.
Janetta Jones again with Welcome. I just wanted to, I guess, first applaud the Volkswagen Foundation and the work that they're doing. And the experimentation is something that we're thinking about at Welcome. So the whole debate around peer review has actually obviously been going for a long time, and that's also true at Welcome. But one thing that we decided to do is actually test it. And I think unless you actually do some experiments, quasi-experiments, RCTs, if you really want to be bold, we don't actually know if there is a problem, the extent of the problem, and to what extent we can improve upon that. So something we're doing at Welcome, which we'll be announcing in the next couple of months, is we're actually making ourselves the subject of a research study. And I'll bring up the idea of science funding. We're talking about science. We expect our scientists to conduct very rigorous science, then why would we not also subject ourselves to the same type of research? And so just preliminarily, I would say that there is evidence, and I think we also have evidence that actually, I think there's huge opportunity to improve the system that we use to make funding decisions. And I think, there were some discussions earlier by Thomas and others that there's no doubt that it's actually needed, but there's also, I think there's some pretty convincing evidence that there's a lot more that we can do, and we need to move beyond just being dealing with kind of anecdotal and really understand what the nature of the problem is. We are all humans. We are all subject to bias, and no matter how big your funding portfolio is or how many people you deploy, there's no doubt that all that bias adds up. And so I do think there's an opportunity for us to really think about this in a more scientifically rigorous way.
How does that sound?
Great.
Great. Sven? Yeah, and Britt-Marie?
That's great. But I wanted to comment on interdisciplinarity that you had in your OECD report, actually. And I don't think that we are mistreating interdisciplinary research. But of course, there are always research that you have to grade rather low and that do not get funding. And if you look at it from a researcher's point of view, it's very tough to say to yourself that my proposal wasn't good enough, I didn't get funded. And so if you are in an interdisciplinary area, you can always say that they didn't understand what we wrote. And so that is the more logical explanation to stick to, kind of. And so I think it's quite often brought up, actually, that we treat interdisciplinary not very well. I think we do.
Thank you. Should we just also come back to the situation for the upcoming generation, the young scientists and the young researchers? What more we can do to support them? I know that, Lars, you wanted to have a say now. You told me before. So now you have the chance.
Move on and move. Make moves.
Make moves.
Go,
Don't give up.
We heard, go for postdocs. Not everyone does. It's not even required at many universities when you're hired. So you expect to have a tenure track. The universities do not expect you to have made a postdoc. I think that is a severe problem in the Swedish system. Go for sabbaticals. Go ask your vice chancellor for money to be leave of absence for that sabbatical. It's not even leave of absence. You're active in your field by going on the sabbatical. The vice chancellor will return to you or the dean saying, sorry, we have no funds for that. And you shouldn't be accepting that answer because it's all possible, as was indicated here by Sven. The universities they have they can master the funds. They can choose to prioritize in that or another or many ways. And I submit that would be a good way.
What have been really important in your career? Where have you changed your mind and made other choices than you thought you would?
I've made some of those moves and choices myself. There's one which I didn't do because I didn't realize at the time, but I was fortunate enough to be in an environment where the seminar culture was kind of in effect, and the colleague was the collegium was working. There was quite little, not disturbing infighting. So if you can choose a university or a setting where there is a lot of focus and care for who gets recruited, because that person will be part of our community. The spirit of some working together, and it could be interdisciplinary. Treasure those environments where you can find them, but you will not be able to find them unless you sample for a while. And grants from us here could probably help you to make that sampling.
Short, yes, please.
Yes. I think for young researchers, they need to have reasonable funds to set up a reasonably big group. Science is not an enterprise. You shouldn't run it like a company. Stanford University, that's very successful. I think they restrict most research groups to about 8 people. If you want to have a bigger research group, go somewhere else. At Stanford University, the group is 8 people, and that's what you handle successfully. And then I think that universities should actually give young researchers the chance to know the rules of the game. Because nowadays, as I understand it, the rules of the game are not understandable. They are perhaps not even formulated. So for young researchers, after 4 or 6 years, when they get evaluated, that's when they get to know what they were expected to achieve during this time. And that's the worst thing that you could ever do to them, I think.
Sven?
I would say, if as a young researcher, if you know that you have a good research idea, a strong science case, so stick to that, be devoted, and let nothing hinder that. I think it should come from inside, sort of, and of course the system should assist in that, in the career path. I think also for universities, the career development positions, the biträdande lektor, should be used to a larger extent. This gives another type of security, a kind of tenure track that I think is used too little. Often universities or departments, they hire at other positions, research forskarpositioner, which I think is better to use this career development position.
So, Göran, do you have any more one-liners?
Well, I have one for the young females. No is a very good word. Everyone's a piece of you, and if you allow them to take a piece of you, you will not have time to focus on your science. And if this system is not, it will not tolerate that you not deliver. So if you spend too much on committees, and I'm looking at Mia that I talked about that, you will get it back sooner or later. So
And you
stay
don't
out too
need
many
a
committees.
reason for saying no. You can just say no.
You don't have to argue.
I know, as a woman, I can tell you, we think of some reason that we always need to have a reason for everything. But sometimes you can just say, no, thank you, I can't do that.
Take your teaching and then
Another time,
avoid a
maybe.
lot of other things.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank this fantastic panel for sharing your ideas and thoughts. And it's time now for the last panel with the researchers on stage. So thank you very much.